And usually there'd be logos all over it if it was a Sony or Oculus or whatnot. It's probably a beta tester.
No, this is not beta anything. You don't understand. This was indistinguishable from reality. Put it on.
Okay. Holy shit. This is mental. This is... This is not normal. Do you understand how far beyond the current state of the art this is?
And I had a similar reaction first time I tried the Pimax Crystal Light. With its QLED panels and glass aspheric lenses, the colors were just so vibrant, the scenes were just super bright, and the colors just popped. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you the story. When the lens cracked on my beloved Pimax 8KX,
No.
I immediately pre-ordered the Pimax Super, but it's gonna be a while before that headset arrives, and while I was waiting, the lovely people at Pimax sent me over the Crystal Light to try, and it was perfect timing as the PSVR 2, which I was temporarily using, just wasn't doing it for me. From the very first time I tried virtual reality, I was infatuated with that 3D world that it immersed me in. VR is the only thing that came close to fulfilling that childhood dream of actually sitting in a fighter jet, and once I went down that VR rabbit hole, I upgraded my CPU and then my GPU. Next thing I know, I had replaced my entire computer. Trying to get the best experience from VR I could, I was now in search of a better headset, and that rabbit hole led me to the Pimax Crystal Light. I've had 3 headsets before this one, the HP Reverb G2, the Pimax 8KX, and the PSVR 2, which I recently reviewed, and all of them had Fresnel lenses. So this was the first headset where I got to experience glass aspheric lenses. And it's like going from a 4th generation fighter to a 5th generation fighter. It really is just the next level. Pardon the pun, but it really is crystal clear when it comes to clarity. And even the feel of it just felt so much more high quality than anything else I've played with. Even the plastic felt like a higher quality than my old 8KX. One of the things all of my headsets I've owned have in common is a DisplayPort connection. So if I had a wish list of things that go into the perfect VR headset, DisplayPort connection would be on it. Especially for digital combat simulator, it just gives you uncompressed visuals with low latency. I just don't want to be bothered with having to mess with the Wi-Fi. Installing the headset was pretty straightforward, and I won't go into great detail because there's tons of other videos on how to do that. I want to focus mainly on how this performs for DCS, but I did want to go over the Pimax Play software as it has changed slightly since I last used it. They now have a store, although I only play pretty much DCS. What's also interesting, if you go to my assets, they brought over the only game I've ever tried on Steam VR. And if you don't see your game here, you can also just hit the import button. So I thought that was a nice touch. Everything is right here. And you don't have to import DCS. You can just launch it from the desktop. But how does it perform in DCS? Because that's really all I care about. Surprisingly very good, a little too good, and I'll explain that in a second, but my very first reaction was wow, the clarity of glass lenses, this is what everybody's been talking about. Coming from Fresnel lenses, you can imagine what a shock it was for me. The sweet spot was massive.
And you know what else is massive?
The resolution. It's 2880 by 2880 with 35 pixels per degree.
It's massive.
There are going to be headsets coming out with higher resolution, like the Pimax Super, but I think the performance balance is perfect, and that resolution is still big.
That's what she said.
So honestly, just a few seconds after being in the game, I was wondering how is this running better than the PSVR 2 that I just reviewed, and this thing has a higher resolution. Plus it looks 10 times better. You may think I'm a little bit slow, but honestly, I played for about 20 minutes before I realized that foveated rendering was turned on.
You'll have to excuse my friend. He's a little slow.
And I don't think I noticed it right away because I was just so enamored at how well the game was running, at how smooth the game was running. I had just finished reviewing the PSVR 2, which didn't run as well, with the same graphics card, and I was so distracted at how well the performance was that I wasn't even looking for the foveated rendering, so I guess I just didn't see it. And it wasn't until I paused the game that I finally saw it and realized foveated rendering is turned on. I also have a suspicion that OpenXR just runs better than than Steam VR. So I was in such a rush to just put the headset on and try it. I failed to look at what the default settings were until after I was playing, but what they had it on was 90 Hz with Pimax Open XR quad views enabled. So this is the microphone from the Pimax Crystal Lite. So I spawned in to show you what the quad views look like, and for some reason I cannot figure out how to record it and have it show up in the recording. But I am recording from the left eye of the Pimax Crystal Lite. And if I could just jump in here and clarify myself, the quad views work great in the Pimax software and in DCS. But the problem is when it's on in DCS, for some reason, it messes up my recording. So I turn it off in DCS and then I can record the video. And I'm not sure why, it's a DCS setting. If I could simulate it, it would look something like this. And that's why I didn't notice it at first, because it's on the peripheral of my vision. And also I'm slow. And just look how crystal clear these MFDs, these buttons and these gauges are. I literally got sidetracked in what I was supposed to be doing. I am very happy with this, very happy. So I've accidentally spawned in max settings. Like you literally can't get any more max settings than this. Yeah, these aren't the settings that I'd be flying with in VR, because I'm sure in a dogfight, like this is not gonna, these settings would probably cause me to lag or jitter, but this is max settings. I am very happy. Like these are the settings that I use to record my replays in VR. Oh wow, the fact that it's running this smooth in maximum settings, I am very happy. I am very, very happy. But yeah, let me show you the settings that I normally fly in, because these are not the settings that I normally have. So in DCS, I'm pretty much on the basic VR settings. In the Pimax Play device settings, I run it at 72 Hz. I can't really tell the difference between 72 and 90. I want to get the best performance and the smoothest looking game I can in the headset, and for me, just to be safe, I go with 72. For my games, I do turn off Pimax Open XR quad views just because I've tested it with it on and off, and my GPU is powerful enough that I don't really need it. And also I've tested it with medium and high, and because they're so close in visuals for me, I just keep it on medium just to make sure I get the best, smoothest running game. Now this is what's nice. If you have a lower end GPU, you can really fine tune it for your graphics card. So we're back in the game with our lower settings. So now we can kind of compare what this looks like to our max settings. So it's really hard to show you on a flat monitor what VR looks like when I'm looking at it through my eyes. It's almost like trying to compare an IMAX theater to your home television, but at least what I can show you is a live recording of what the left eye sees in the Pimax Crystal Lite. Now normally I record my DCS content from the replays, but I think this looks so good right now that you could probably just stream this live or record this live. Also, I'm not using any kind of head smoothing or smoothing setting. I think when the game is running well with no jitters and there's no loss of tracking, it also looks smooth in the recording. And looking at just how good this is live, I'm thinking I might go back to recording live video, because it is a lot of work to go back into the replay, and it would be easier to get live reactions for the video. I think what makes the live recording so good for the Crystal Lite is because it does have such a square resolution. The picture is more centered when recording, even from just one eye. And this is something I just couldn't do with the Pimax AKX. With that thing's whopping 200 FOV, if you measure diagonally, the picture from just one eye would be super offset. And that brings us to the FOV. The Pimax Crystal Lite has got a good FOV, and I can only compare it to what I have. It's noticeably bigger than my HP Reverb G2. It's very similar to the PSVR 2, as I just avoid hitting the trees there, but I do think it's still bigger in the vertical. And in fact, I think out of all of my headsets, I think it has the biggest vertical FOV. Ooh, that was a good shot. And I do think the vertical is pretty important for dogfighting, as many times you'll find yourself looking straight up, looking for the hostile. It still doesn't beat the king of FOV in the horizontal, which is the Pimax AKX, but the AKX uses the old Fresnel lenses. But I will say this, the peripheral vision of the AKX did get a little blurry, and with the Pimax Crystal Lite, it's crystal clear and I can actually see the aspect of the enemy so much better, and it's very beneficial for dogfighting to know the aspect of the enemy. So just as important as the visuals, I think, is the tracking. So how is the tracking in the Crystal Lite? It's got built-in tracking, so no base stations required. I found the first day I played, it was perfect for about 2 hours. I was so excited to put the headset on, I literally tweaked nothing. I just jumped right in until it lost tracking. And when that happens, it was very nauseating. But I think I've mostly solved why that was happening. I think the biggest thing is the lighting. The Crystal Light loves to have a well-lit room. I ended up adding a standing lamp, and then I also have a couple lamps in the corners of my room. Also made sure the overhead light was on, and made sure to turn off my ceiling fan as that was causing a strobing effect with the lights. I also have 3 valve base stations pointed right at my flight chair. I didn't even think to turn those off, but that could have an effect on the headset because that's 3 lasers flickering right at your face. Also, the Pimax Crystal Light uses 4 built-in cameras, which does use your CPU for the calculations. So I'd recommend a good CPU and also not running a ton of things in the background, because if your CPU does max out, it may cause a hiccup in the tracking. Now, it does have an optional Lighthouse faceplate, which is currently out of stock, but I've already got 4 base stations, so I would love to test this out and compare it to the inside-out tracking. My other speculation of what could cause head tracking issues is a constant fiddling with the headset, which does bring me to the comfort and fit of the Pimax Crystal Light. And for me, I like to have my VR headset really tight, pressed right up against my face. I don't want any kind of wiggle or movement, so what I had to do was add a thicker cushion, and then I'll really crank tight the knob in the back. And that could be why my lens cracked on my 8KX. And this Crystal Light is a loner, so I'm a little bit afraid to over tighten it. So this is the Crystal Light face gasket, and this camera is from 2013, so I'm sorry about the quality. But if you look here, I believe this cutout is for people that wear glasses, and this is exactly where it's loose for me. Also, if you notice the curvature, it's pretty flat. I wish I had a basketball to test, because I feel like if your head is shaped like that, it's a perfect fit. It's not Pimax's fault that my head is shaped like this. But I think for me, I would need it to curve in more like this. If you look at the old Reverb G2 face gasket, you can really see how much more curved that one was. I wish Pimax would just straight up copy that curvature, because I think most of us eggheads would agree that the G2 was one of the best fitting headsets right out of the box. I'm hoping in the future they'll have a narrow face option, because I think there's a lot of us out there. It's easy to test for IPD, but I don't know how you would test for narrow face. And at the moment, this is my favorite headset, and I want the best for Pimax. So what I've done here is added an old Samsung Odyssey cushion, and the problem for me is the gaps right here on the side. Without having extra thick cushions, it wobbles on my face. But I think a better option is to go with Studio Form, and I actually reached out to them to see if they'll send me some samples. I think what I need is the shims to build up the sides, and once I get the samples, I'll do a full review on those. But I think this is going to be a must-have if you're in that narrow face category, and I'll go ahead and put a link in the description below to their website. So I've been a big fan of Pimax since the Pimax 8KX, and if I had a checklist for things I wanted in a VR headset for DCS, the Pimax Crystal Light checks almost all the boxes. DisplayPort connection, OLED panels, glass aspheric lenses, and a head strap design that pulls the faceplate tightly against your face. After testing the PSVR 2, I realized that the Halo design is just not for me. And look, combat flight simulation is a niche within the VR community, and I feel like Pimax has been devoted to that niche. They're known for their high-end, more expensive headsets, and if you're the type of person that buys the 5090 graphics card, you're probably going to get a Pimax Super. But for those of you that can't afford the Super, you're not going to find a VR headset with higher specs than the Pimax Crystal Light at this price. And in fact, the Pimax Crystal Light is the lowest priced headset that Pimax has ever released. And I've always wanted to say this, Pimax just informed me that if you use code RELOAD in the item shop, the store, you can get a small 3% discount when buying either a Pimax Crystal Light or Super. Links in the description. Wait, I didn't even get a discount.